In late winter, early spring, we're all getting a little antsy to get back out in the garden. And a lot of times we start thinking about transplants and wanting to get those plants started earlier. Often gardeners talk about getting a hobby greenhouse and what all is involved in that process. And I have to admit, on a snowy day in the winter, there's no better place to be than in a hobby greenhouse where it's nice and warm. We're going to go in and talk with Bailey Singleton about what it took to get this hobby greenhouse going. Hey, Bailey.
Hey, Casey.
It is much warmer in here.
It is. There's snow out there. It's really cold.
So I know that I always find you out here in the wintertime. It's
Yep.
like your second office. Tell me a little bit about what you've done to kind of get this greenhouse online for us.
So one of the first things that I had to do was make sure that it could hold temperature. And so there was a lot of gaps at the very bottom of the greenhouse because it was a previously used greenhouse. We rebuilt it here. So I went through with spray foam and filled in all of the gaps underneath. That way, whenever there's snow outside, you can see at the bottom of the greenhouse, you can see the snow in the bed outside, but it's warm in here.
Right, right. So we have it sealed up. Now let's talk temperature. Obviously, that's the biggest priority.
Yes.
Heat
so
in the wintertime
for
and
sure.
cooling in the summertime.
Yeah, so I wanted to get a good space heater, and so this is an oil-filled radiator heater. So it's rated for about this square footage of this room. And so it keeps it really warm. It has its own thermostat, so it'll turn off if it's above the temperature that it's set to. So it comes on, it does its thing. If you tip it over, it turns off automatically like a good space heater would do. So you don't have to worry about anything bad happening that way.
I think that's one of the concerns is like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not going to have this in my space all the time. I'm going to leave. I want it to stay on.
Yes, so I've not had any issues with it, and I've done a lot of tests before putting plants in here and just being able to maintain that temperature.
Yeah.
However, whenever it gets really sunny, even on these cold winter days, like it was 30 degrees yesterday, really sunny, it got really warm in here. And so you don't want to open up the door and let all of the hot air out. So this vent that I installed, I got it online. It's also rated for about this size room.
Okay.
So people put it in their attics, in their garages, whatever. It has its own thermostat as well. So whenever it gets above, I think I have it set at 85 degrees right now, it'll kick on and try to kick some of that air out.
Okay. Heat rises, so it's headed out that way.
And so that's why I put it so high up. I put it as high up on the greenhouse as I could, which is another reason why I chose the specific door for this greenhouse.
Okay, because the door we got was kind of broken and didn't work really well.
Yeah, you couldn't open the screen, but with this door, you can pull down the screen from the top. So it's also able to pull that air. So whenever the vent kicks on, I can crack the window and it pulls air from the top. Okay. So all that hot air can just go straight outside.
And I think that's one of the things you have to consider when you're building a greenhouse or managing a greenhouse is the airflow. And you don't want necessarily the air that's coming in to go immediately out or the hot air to go immediately out. So you got it heated. What about when we want to cool it off?
So I have this little air conditioner in here. It doesn't work the greatest, but it does a little bit. Okay. So we're not growing plants in here in the summertime, so it's going to be really hard to keep the temperature down. But it does a little bit and it will blow cool air.
It's really surprising. Like, again, it is below freezing outside. You come in here, I need to take my jacket off.
I think it's about 70 degrees, yeah.
You don't realize how much just that solar effect of the greenhouse effect really does compensate for that temperature.
For sure. And so on the days whenever it is super warm, I have these cool little thermometers that I keep in here.
Okay.
And so these connect to my phone via an app, and it shows me the highs and the lows for whatever the temperature is. So if I leave work yesterday and I can come in today, it'll show me how low the greenhouse actually got. And so I can put parameters on there to alert me whenever the temperatures are above a certain degree or below. But this one works for Bluetooth just as the base model, but there are other components you can buy that connect it to your Wi-Fi, and it'll alert you no matter where you're at.
Okay, all right. So, and you know, if this was in your backyard, right, that Bluetooth option might work for you. We don't necessarily live here. And so when you come back, it reconnects via Bluetooth.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So one other thing I know you guys do during the summer to kind of help moderate that greenhouse effect is the shade cloth.
Yeah, so later in the spring, before we can actually put all the plants outside, we'll put a shade cloth on the outside. And so the sun will be beating in here and it'll get well over 100 degrees easily, even without the heater on, just with the sun. So that shade cloth helps block some of it. I think the one that we use is about a 50% shade, so it still allows light to come through, but it helps cool the greenhouse dramatically.
All right, and then when it does get too hot, we seal
get
it
out of here. Yeah,
and that's honestly a functional part of having a greenhouse, because we sterilize it that way, right?
Yes, it gets really hot in here during the summertime. When it's 115 outside, it's easily 150 inside the greenhouse, even without the shade cloth or anything.
Of course, you want to be mindful of any electrical components that you
or
you
leaving anything in here.
Right,
It'll fade really bad.
Okay, or melt.
Or melt, it's happened.
So also within this space, I mean, this is a fairly small space. What is the dimensions on this?
It's a 12 by 9.
Okay, but it's nice to be able to come in here and actually see the space and feel it and see whether it's big enough for you as a home gardener and stuff. But to utilize that space functionally well, we have microclimates.
For sure.
But you're also trying to have growing space, but yet you have storage space. Let's talk about those two things.
Yes. So I have these plastic benches. If you go on Pinterest and you look at any of the ideas for hobby greenhouses or backyard greenhouses, they're all really cute and they have all of these wooden components, but that's not necessarily the most functional for what we're doing. So these are plastic.
Wood rots.
Yes, wood rots. And so that means you're going to have to replace that every year-ish or whatever. And so we are able to use these plastic ones so that way we can water and not have to worry about any diseases being trapped in that or just the wood breaking on us from all of the moisture from watering the plants.
Okay.
And so we've incorporated the wood design a couple other ways. So I have this little potting bench over here that it has a wood top, but it's sealed. So I don't have to worry about it rotting. And so it's about the perfect height to be able to pot up little plants and then put them back on the benches.
And you also have, I think it's like a baker's rack basically, but it's a coated metal.
Yes, it is a coated metal. So this one fit the space perfectly, and so it's wide enough and long enough for the heat mat that we already had. And so I have lights hung from them, and I have some little seedlings already started. But whenever I go to water those, because it is also storage, I have stuff underneath. So I have to pull the seedlings off, water it, let the water quit draining, and then I can put it back on the bench.
Okay. And something to be mindful, like anytime you add stuff on there, you're blocking that light that's coming through on the stuff below it. So, so again, let's talk about microclimate. So our greenhouse, like most greenhouses in Oklahoma, are on a north-south direction. So that then means we have east and west to that, right?
Yes.
So I've noticed that you've got your cool season on one side and more of your warm plants on the other side.
That is very intentional. Okay. So the cord for the heater is only so long. So I have it as middle of the room as I can, but it favors the west side. And so I have my warm season plants over there. So whenever the sun comes through on the west, it gets all of that extra sun, and then it has that heat from that side, and then the heater's also closer. Okay. So those plants are doing better on that side. Over here, I have the cool season plants just because it's basically only getting warmth from that eastern sun, and then it's a little further away from the heater.
Okay.
I do have a couple test plants in here that I like to use. So
those are your canaries?
Yeah, so this is the pothos. You can see it got burnt the other day. I had it hanging on the north wall.
Because we got down to 17 or something.
Yeah, so it got really cold the other day.
Not in here.
Not
outside,
in the greenhouse, outside of the greenhouse. And so this particular branch or this leaf was touching the wall of the north side of the greenhouse. Okay. And so it got burnt, and so I don't think there's any coming back from that one.
You know, that's something to be mindful of is, again, any of that plant tissue that's actually touching the plastic can be cold itself, even though the ambient air might be warm. Yes. And that's something we always tell people out in the garden when they're wanting to protect their plants, like don't actually put the plastic right on the plant because, you know, you want to lift it up so that you're creating that pocket of air as insulation. Otherwise, that plastic can burn plants too.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, otherwise, it looks like your plant's doing fine.
Yep. It's not gotten too cold to kill it or the fern that I have in here. So I think it's holding its temperature pretty well.
So all in all, I mean, the idea, a lot of people think, oh, I just wish I had a little place to play. But there is some maintenance and work that's involved in having a hobby greenhouse. Well, Bailey, thank you so much. This is great information, and it looks like you're off to a good start already.
Yes. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.